Hey guys, welcome back to the Tukes and Tires YouTube channel. As always, I'm Zach. In this video, we're going to see about getting the small block Chevy fired up in the Jeep for the first time and maybe even moving under its own power. So, let's see what it does.
Hey, is that Timmy's?
Yeah, because we're in Canada. Alright guys, so last time when you saw the Jeep, we were putting the small block and the NV3500 transmission into this thing. So this video, I'd really like to get a lot of the small things done. We'll put in quotations, small things. So I mean like wiring, maybe the clutch stuff. So I got some stuff in the mail. I got the radiator. I got the springs for the front end. So I don't know what we're all going to get done in this video. But I'm going to start tackling the wiring first so that at least then the motor will start up. I know we got the exhaust to do as well, so we're going to see what we can get done. So I'm going to get a table set up out here just so I can lay this wiring out. We are going to be trying to reuse the existing wiring from the Jeep. So before we took the motor out, I did label on you know, what the stuff was. So I got like oil, I got like coolant for the distributor coil, everything there. So basically I'm going to cut out what we don't need, and we're going to see if hopefully maybe this stuff is still going to work. So we'll come back to maybe once I got her a little more ripped apart, unloomed, and some stuff cut out of it. So yeah, let's get after it. Well, there we have it. We got a huge pile of old wires on the ground. So basically how I went about this is just how I do my LS harnesses. So on the channel, we do a lot of LS engines, and I've cut one apart before. So basically you just cut off what you don't need and you start pulling out the extra wires. So that's how this kind of went. So I'm pretty happy with how the harness is looking. We're not going to loom it just yet because we might change some stuff, but I kept like the coil and the distributor wires, the oil temp or coolant temp and oil pressure, and then I kept the stuff that would have been on the other transmission, so like reverse lights and all that kind of jazz, speedometer. But I thought I'd show these plugs here just because this is like kind of where you have to pull the wires out of, and both of them are totally different from one another. So this is there would be two plugs like this that are up on the firewall in the center. So you just have to pull out the red center, and then what you can do is I just made up a homemade little tool. You got to shove it in on the one side where the pin is actually locking it in, and that looks like this. So it has just a hole, and then you can pull that out the back, those ones, and then the other plug is a little more confusing. So this is what actually goes into the computer, and we do have to keep that to run the gauges. Well, I'm thinking at least it's going to make it easier. So this is kind of like a, I don't know, it's like a three-part deal. So you got to take the backer off, which that's easy, it just kind of clips on. And then the main part, there is a blue section in there that you actually have to move over to the side. So there's a double, and then there's a single spot where you can see. So you just push the single spot in, and that releases the pins. And then what you can do is you can pry on either side where these holes are and basically pop the back section out, and then you'll see the pins look like this. You do have to obviously cut your plugs off, so they're just wires, and then these wires actually pull through the face, and they just look like that. So to get this back together, you kind of gently have to kind of wiggle the prongs in. It is doable. Just take your time. It's kind of a tedious thing. And then you just snap it back together the way you took it apart. Remember that. It's important. I'm going to get that all back together, and then we're going to try to sling this up into the Jeep. But we're not going to cover it, like I said, just so that if we have to do any changes, we can. But you'll probably come back and we'll have that kind of thrown up in there to see where we got to run it and where our plugs are going to work out the best for the sensors. So, Lacey, let's get after it. All right, guys, so we pulled the Jeep into the barn. It was raining outside. This is a new day, so we just wanted to stay dry. We got that wiring finished up. I didn't route it just yet. I thought we would do some more, you know, tricky things. So we're working on exhaust right now. And we've had these block hugger headers for like ever, and they're going to work out perfect on the Jeep. Just the flange was all messed up, so Dad has this set of headers that we've been cutting apart over the years that we're gonna basically cut this part off and attach it to there. So we got one in there just right now, but what we got to do is we got to figure out the angle of that. So we just got it in there. I'm gonna probably hack that header apart over there to see where I got to weld that on, and then we can start making up a Y from that. So we'll get this other one put in there, and then we'll come back to probably once we got our piece to see what we got to do to make it fit in there. I also got to get the starter in there and the slave so that we know to work around that. But so far it's looking like we got a ton of room in there, so that's pretty awesome. So I totally forgot to film welding this together, but we did get these headers all fixed up, so they're looking pretty sweet now. I already got the one thrown in there. I just cut about 2 inches off of this other header there and figured out what angle we needed to put it at. So those are going to work out really awesome now, and the collector, the way it comes down, it's going to work out really good for, being out of the way for the drive shaft and just the way we're going to have to route that. And if anybody was curious why I was hacking it off, I think, did I show this? I'm not quite sure, but this thing is, yeah. So that's the thing. So now what we're going to move on to, I'm not going to do the Y just yet, because I think I'm going to try to tackle that on the hoist. But I think I'm going to try to do some clutch stuff and put that starter in, because I never did that. And I'm going to show you guys what I bought to adapt this NV3500 to the Jeep. So we'll come back to once we're trying to tackle that. Lacey, she's just helping me all the time. So we got those headers all painted up. They're looking really sweet, but we're going to be moving on to clutch stuff now. There's not a bunch of information out there what people are doing for this situation. Obviously, not a lot of people are putting NV3500s into a Jeep. A lot of people just go automatic, but we wanted to keep it a standard. So this is what I came up with. I am using -3 fittings and all that, AN line. Knowing what I know now, I probably would have went with -4. So if you're going to be going this way, I would definitely recommend -4. But I already bought the stuff, so we're not switching now. So with the Jeep, it doesn't have any kind of like thread-on fitting. So on the Master here, it just takes a line where you like push a pin in, and there's like a seal in there. So I wanted to make it so I could just thread a line on. So they sell these fittings here. You can see that it just slips in there and you push the pin through, and then you put like an AN line on there. That's the part number right there. This is -3. And it only says on here that it works for Chrysler and Jeep. But since we're running a GM transmission, I kind of just, wung it and seeing if this was going to work. So this is the proper slave for the NV3500 transmission. And that fitting actually does go into the end there. Hopefully it's going to seal. We're going to find out basically once we put fluid into it. But it does go in there. So that's how I'm basically going to adapt the clutch stuff on this. And then you can buy basically any length online that you want of the already line that's kind of like put together. So I bought 56 inches. I kind of measured it out and it was like 48, but I want to be on the safe side with that, so I went with the 56. If we just got a little extra, if I just got to coil it up over there or whatever, so be it. But why I'm saying -4 is it would have worked out pretty good on the Slave and on the Master, but I bought these straight fittings, and you can buy them in a 90, but you can't buy them in a -3. And it's alright for myself over here on the Master side of things, but here where the exhaust comes down, basically where this is going to be, it's going to go like straight into the exhaust. So basically what I did now is I just bought a 90 fitting that's going to get turned onto this, and then we're going to go, so basically there's going to be an extra joint. Nothing wrong with that, it's just what I know now. I probably would have switched that. I would have bought the -4, and I already would have bought these in a 90 fitting, but such is life. So I'm going to get under there, throw this stuff in, and then we're going to see how it looks when it's ran in there. Hopefully it's going to be pretty slick. Here we go. So we got our clutch line all ran in those fittings, and that line worked out really sweet. The 56-inch line was just long enough to go underneath the booster, over top of the back of the bell housing, and then you can see that it comes down just over there. So we'll get underneath so you guys can see what that fitting looks like on the Slave. So you can see that's our 90 fitting there. I just had to wait for that in the mail. If I would have known like this information before, I would have bought dash 4 and just bought the 90s, but such is life. So we did bleed it. The clutch is working pretty slick. I think there's just a little bit of air left in the line, but we'll bleed that once it's on the hoist. But I did get up to a bunch of other things, so I ended up slinging the harness up here and figuring out where we had to run the wires. So the computer wiring runs pretty nicely over there. The coolant one was just long enough for the coolant temp. I did have to shorten the oil pressure one back there. So that's going to work out really awesome. The distributor should go in there and those wires should go around it. So hopefully, anyways, I still have to figure out the coil plug. I think I'm going to run this to a relay just because I don't trust the size of the wire that it is. So basically we're just going to use this wire to trigger a relay to run it for that distributor for that coil wire. And then I think I'm going to end up using, because I don't need any wires out of this distributor plug that was for the old motor, but I'm going to end up using the keyed power from it for the electric choke on the carburetor. So hopefully that's going to work out. We are going to be moving on the fuel stuff, so I already got this fuel regulator mounted on the firewall here. So we do have to drop the tank in this thing to change out the fuel pump, because the pressure I think is, they're running about like 40 pounds on this thing. And I have a pump here that I bought with some other stuff that's only putting out like 14 pounds. So that way that regulator doesn't have to work too hard to pressure it down to 7. So I'll meet you guys around back once we're trying to figure out how to drop the tank in this thing. So let's get after it. All right, so I just peeked my head underneath, seeing what I had to do to get this tank out of here. The guy we bought it off of, he put a new cover on this gas tank. So I guess I'm not a Jeep guy. So the gas tank is actually holding in that cover, and it looks like there's just a couple bolts on how to get that out of there. And then I noticed if I took the tire off, it was going to be really easy to disconnect all the wires and the lines and stuff. I'm assuming that's from the charcoal canister. That was just kind of slipped on there. Wiring came off really easy. And then I just used one of these things just to pop that factory style clip off of there. So that's all off. I got the fuel filler neck disconnected here, so hopefully that's going to go down the hole. I shined a flashlight down in there to see that it's, you know, it's going to make it down in there. Hopefully it's gonna. So all I got to do now is disconnect the bolts, and we'll see about slipping the tank out from the bottom. Cross your fingers, it's going to come out. So we got that tank out of the Jeep, and we're just going to verify what kind of PSI this pump is putting out. I do have this other one here. This is for a TBI setup, so I think it's only 14 PSI, and we don't need any more than 7. So we're just going to juice it up here with this Milwaukee 12-volt battery. It's the easiest way to do it. So we're going to see how much PSI it's putting out. So I'm just going to touch it. So you can see it's holding that there about like 52, and it's supposed to be only about 40. Apparently what it says online. So we're going to open this up, and we're going to put this new one in there just so that we don't have as much pressure. So basically let's start tearing into this thing and see what we got to do to fit that in there. So we got the tank in the barn now, and me and Dad, we took that sending unit out and we've basically mutilated it apart to figure out how it came apart. So we're not using this pump or any of these bags, but obviously we didn't have to take this one off apparently, but you know, we would have in the future. So this is what our baffle is going to be, and that's what the baffle is in the tank. But we're going to modify it, so there's like a little lip in here. We have to cut that off somehow, because this pump right here is the exact same diameter as this one. So it's going to go back into where the old pump was, but it might just sit a little bit lower, and the bag that goes on this is just going to sit in the bottom of this. I don't know, we might drill some holes into this so that gas can get in there easier. I don't know yet, I haven't thought about it. But we'll come back to once we have that together and once it's looking more like what we need to have. So cross your fingers, hopefully it's going to work. All right, so I got this sending unit all back together. I thought I'd show you it before we put this fuel little catch can thing on there. It's a lot easier to see. So we ended up just having to die grind a lip off that was in here because the old pump used to come in from the bottom. This one slips in from the top. It actually just kind of sits on the pump itself there. And then the old pump used to have this little rubber, I don't know, insulator ring. So we ended up just slipping that onto the new pump. We slit this case. So basically the further you push that up, the more it tensions the pump. And then we just got a zip tie on it here that we're going to cut off, and that's kind of just holding it in place. So the pump is nice and sturdy, and from the distance it hangs down, it's going to work out good in this little basket thing. We just spliced the wiring in and reused the original fuel line that was on there, just put a new hose clamp on, so that should be, you know, should all work. And then this thing, we just ended up having to kind of grind out it used to be a lip where the old sock from the old pump used to kind of snap into. So now what's going to happen is that this new one is basically going to sit in the bottom of this, and this is going to be our baffle. Before they only just had this like orange little valve in there for the fuel to get in here. So hopefully this is going to work. The sock is going to be up a little bit higher than it used to be, but it's only going to be, I don't know, maybe a 1/4 inch higher. So hopefully that's going to work out. Obviously, if we have any issues, you know, we could always go and buy just another sending unit and basically reverse the process. But we're going to throw this back into the tank. Me and Dad, we're going to check the pressure. We're going to show you that, and then we'll see about getting it back up in the Jeep and then running the fuel line. So that's pretty wicked. All right, so we threw the sending unit back into the tank, and we just juiced it up again with that Milwaukee battery. It's 12 volts. And it's holding pressure at 20 pounds, so that's really awesome. And basically my thought process behind that is that the old pump was putting out 52 pounds, and it would really be working hard, reducing itself down to 7 psi. So this obviously isn't going to work as hard to reduce itself down. We're not doing any kind of return style system. It's basically just going there and shooting the pressure. So now we're going to get this thing thrown up back in the Jeep, and I'll show you guys what we're going to do for a fuel line. So that's awesome. Alright, so we got the tank thrown back up in the Jeep, and now we're going to be running a new fuel line. The old one probably would have been okay, but I destroyed it, so now we got to put a new one in. So we're going to be using this 3/8 aluminum line, and the way we're going to join it to the tank back there is I bought this quick disconnect. This is 5/16 to -6 AN, and then we're just going to be using a tube nut with a tube sleeve on the end of this aluminum 3/8 line, and then we're going to be putting a flare on it. So this is our flaring tool. We've used this in other videos before, so this puts a 37-degree flare onto the end of that tube, so it'll seal really nicely onto this fitting, and then we can run this up, and then we'll just end up just putting just a regular barb onto the end of this line. So basically with how to do that, what we do is with this Eastwood brake, you know, flaring tool, we just end up just doing operation 1, and that puts a really nice barb on the end. We'll show you that once we get it done. So I'm going to make up this line, get it thrown into the Jeep because it's a little bit of a hassle getting underneath there, and then we'll come back to once we got it to where we need it to be. So here we go. So I figured before I take this out of the flaring tool, I'd show you how basically it works. I've already flared it, so when you start this off, you would stick your line in, obviously making sure that you have your dies in the right direction and that you have your tube nut sleeve on there and the tube nut itself on there the proper way. And then you just leave it loose. You do operation 0, so that puts it where the line needs to be at the start. And then you would move to your operation 1 for 3/8 because we're doing 3/8 line. Pull that in, and then you would go to operation 2 to get our 70 or 37-degree flare in there. So it's looking pretty good. I always make sure I check it before I take it out of the flaring tool, just to make sure that we have enough of an angle on there. So it's looking all right. So we'll pull this out and see about weaving this down into the Jeep. So we got that new fuel line in there, and it's looking pretty slick. We just got that AN fitting in there. I don't know if you can see that because I can't see what you're looking at, but that worked out really awesome. We ran the fuel line in the original clips, and then we just brought it up the firewall here, gave it a couple 90s, and then we just have that's like a high pressure EFI fuel line thing that you can buy at like the auto parts store. I don't know, it just looks like regular fuel line. But that runs over to our regulator, and then we just have just some just a simple filter on this side, on the low pressure side. We did turn the key and it did pump up some fuel. It's only set at 3 pounds right now. We need to get that to around 6, 7-ish. So me and Dad, we're gonna mess around with that. And we're doing some testing on the wiring, and we're thinking we're having an issue with the alternator. So we're gonna try to put the Jeep one in here, see if that's gonna make a difference. And then we're gonna see if this thing fire up. I have to throw some new oil into it and put this new filter on, so fingers crossed that it's gonna fire up. Also want to give a big shout out to Harman's HVS. They build custom drive shafts, and they made this thing up really quick within a couple hours for us, so it's gonna be super awesome that we're gonna be able to move the Jeep around. So if you're in the KW, Cambridge area, they also do Woodstock and Walkerton, so definitely go check them out. I'll leave a link down below for them. Tell Chris that I sent you. So I just told them what I needed, what length and what ends, and you know, they delivered. So super awesome. So now with that, we're gonna get that installed as well, and we're gonna see if this thing's gonna fire up. So fingers crossed. All right guys, so it's a new day. Me and Dad messed around all last night trying to get this wiring to work, trying to figure it out. So basically I think what happened was, as soon as we started cutting like majority of the wires out of the harness, the computer didn't like that. And now we're not getting a positive signal to the existing coil wire. So we had to come up with some other solution. So I did some looking around here, and I just started probing stuff to see which wires were a keyed source that would stay on while the key was turning for the starter. So I started probing the fuse box, and I found out, like, I was like, well, there's this AC thing, like this truck never had AC. So I probed in between these two relays, and I actually found a pin. I'm pretty sure it was the bottom one on the left there, and that had keyed power while it was cranking. So what I ended up doing is I actually took this whole fuse box apart. You wouldn't have to. You could have literally just put like a male connector down in that pin and run external relay to trigger the coil, but I went obviously above and beyond, and there was an empty relay spot right here. So I ended up just wiring it all in here so it looks pretty slick, and I don't have to worry about the relay hanging out in the wide open. It's going to be nice underneath this cover. I can actually put maybe here relay, and then I think it was the power for that other relay for the AC, which was this one. I ended up changing the wire on that. I upped the size, and that's what's controlling this relay now. So me and Dad did crank on the key to see if we could, you know, if it would start it, and it is working. So we're gonna set you guys up on a tripod. I threw the drive shaft in, so we're gonna see if maybe it's gonna move under its own power for the first time. So fingers crossed. All right guys, so we're gonna see if it's gonna fire up and potentially move under its own power right now. Like I said, we put the drive shaft in it. There's still a bunch of stuff that needs to be tightened down and buttoned up, but we're gonna save that for the next video. I literally have just a pair of vice grips clamped on to where the shifter goes, so we got a lot of work left, but I'm sick and tired of pushing this thing around, so we're gonna see if it's gonna fire up, and then I'm gonna try to stick it in reverse and see what it does. Fingers crossed here it's gonna do something. I'm so sick and tired of pushing this thing around. Man, we got so much work still left to do, but I'm going to take that as a win for today. I'm super happy with this thing, that it actually went into reverse. I'm going to do a bunch of tuning yet because this thing's running like a hot piece of garbage, but I guess you're going to have to stick around for the next video, see that we're going to get the cooling system in it, maybe hook up the power steering, and maybe tidy up a few more things under the engine bay and actually finish maybe some stuff in the interior. I still have like the 4-wheel drive shifter to make up work and all that kind of stuff, but this is super awesome for this video. I'm super happy with this, but thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for subscribing, and as always, don't forget to salute the beaver. We'll catch you next time.